Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world. Welcome to another edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. We have a very special guest with us today. We're joined by Jack Han. Jack has a unique journey in the game, starting as a writer for the Montreal Canadiens website in 2013. And it was there that he first discovered his spark for coaching and analytics, which he put to use the following year when he became the video coach and analytics coordinator for McGill University's women's hockey team. In 2017, he joined the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's a team you might have heard of, in their player development department. And in 2019, he served as an assistant coach for the Toronto Marlies of the AHL. After the 2019-20 season, Jack went off on his own to become a skills development coach and hockey consultant. Jack is the author of the Hockey Tactics 2020, which dives into and details technical and tactical habits of the NHL's top players, and Chell Guide, the first ever tactics guide for the EA Sports NHL video game series, which is awesome. Perhaps most important, Jack is the creator of the Hockey Tactics newsletter, which I suggest everyone that listens or watches this show follows. It gives incredible insight and principles about the game, from tactics to strategy to coaching and everything in between. Jack, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. It's a little bit chilly today, but I'm outside just to get a little fresh air. So we're good. We're enjoying.
There's nothing wrong with a little fresh air.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I want to start with your newsletter and blog because, for lack of a better word, man, I just absolutely love it. I'm completely addicted to it. When I was a kid, I would search the early web, the early internet for anything hockey related so I could learn. And there just wasn't much there. But I literally learned something every time you send out an email. And I got to ask, what spawned you to leave the bench and pursue writing? Because this blog and your current track is really transcendent, and it's something special, I think, in the hockey community.
Sure. So I appreciate you using the word transcendent because that's what we're going for here. But um, it's funny because I was born in China. My parents and I moved to Canada when I was 6 or 7 years old. I didn't know that hockey existed prior to that. So I discovered that, once I got to Canada. But my first talent in life wasn't hockey, or it wasn't even sports. It was writing. And the reason is because, a lot of hockey players got brought up by parents who played, or grandparents who played, or siblings who played. I was brought up by people who were educated and loved to read and write. And my grandfather was an elementary school teacher, and really he was kind of my mentor in terms of developing my love for reading and later writing. Like when I was 5 years old, I was reading at a fifth grade level because that's the books that he had at his house. He taught fifth grade. So I basically was, very advanced for my age all the way through. And actually, when I got to Canada, obviously I would watch the games on Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada. But a lot of how I interacted with hockey was through reading books at the library. So I would go to the library, I would check out every single book about hockey, and a lot of it was like, old kind of yellow paged kind of like, books from the 50s and 60s and so on. But that's how I learned about hockey, because YouTube wasn't around yet. I didn't have cable. I played hockey, but at the lowest level possible, essentially. So really, it was through hockey books and hockey writing that I kind of really fell in love with the game.
It's amazing because I think the three of us on here, the hosts, we have similar stories. We're writers as well, we're coaches as well, and we all fell into the game. And, what we have is this really deep love for the game just beyond the surface, which you clearly do too. And, within your blog, one of the things I love is I love the system sheets that you do for each team. I've been enjoying the draft dev articles you've been doing, but I really also love your insights into coaching. You're not afraid to challenge the status quo, and you use history to back up a lot of your points. I saw articles about Anatoly Tarasov. It's a person we talk about a lot on the show. So for the audience out there, again, we have a lot of people in that U18 audience, coaches, parents. What are your top keys to being a great coach? Because again, for you, it's not just tactics, right? I've seen your articles where you dive into the, motivating an athlete or just the right things to be thinking about. But I wanted to hear it from your mouth.
Well, I don't have decades of coaching experience. I have a few years, but when I was in university studying marketing at McGill, one of my student jobs was actually coaching high school hockey, where I went to school when I was younger. And I would say one of the most satisfying coaching experiences I had, there's two of them. And one of them was one year I had a kid who had asthma. He was a bigger kid, like he was kind of chunky, like a little bit out of shape. And we respected his limitations, and we kind of put him in spots to succeed, and he ended up leading us in goals because he was so good around the net, and he had a good shot for his age. He was a bigger kid. And then we kind of lose touch for a decade and a half, and then I realized later on that he's at Harvard on a lacrosse scholarship. Like he'd outgrow his asthma. He didn't pursue hockey, but then that allowed him to fall in love with lacrosse, and he was one of the better long sticks players in Canada in his birth year, right? So, um, even kind of beyond just kind of like an X's and O's level, I really appreciate the connections I make and the ability to influence young people and just help them find their way. And then the second, most rewarding thing is these kids who are 15 years younger than I am, who I coached way back when. I play beer league with them now, right? Like they're actually they're better than me, and sometimes I have a hard time keeping up. But um, they call me and they want me to go hang out with them and go play hockey with them, and that for me is just super rewarding, and it's just awesome. So at the pro level it's different. It's the mindset is much different, but I like coaching because you can kind of mentor another person and share your experiences so that they can kind of do things better than you did.
Right. And I love that lesson, especially for coaches of younger kids. You're never going to get that perfect hockey player at the younger years where they can do it all. So you need to look at the team and look at their strengths and weaknesses and use it to their advantage. Just like you saw with the one player with asthma. Okay, so he wasn't great, maybe not a great skater, but gosh, he was so good in front of that net. Let's get situations where he's there. That is such an important lesson to drive home to all coaches. Don't look at the shortcomings. Look at what the kids can do for the team and use them in those positions that are going to make the team stronger and better.
Jack, you bring up a great story there. It reminds me of a time I was coaching. And Mike, I want you to talk about this too, because Mike is heavily involved in youth development. But when I was coaching in Europe, we had a player that I used to call him a bowling ball, right? He just was not afraid to go to the net. But no one seemed to know how to utilize him. He had a hard time understanding tactics. He had a hard time, really just kind of expanding beyond this one-dimensional game. And instead of just pushing him aside, we put him on a line with two players that really understood that side of it, and they were able to place him where we needed him to be on the ice. And he ended up being one of the top scorers on the team that year, right? The tragedy of it, and this is why I bring the story up, is that unfortunately, he as happens in pro hockey, he started to think he was at a different level than he probably was. He went to another team, and then he ended up like not scoring at all, right? So I think with coaching, and again, Mike, I want you to speak to this for a quick second too, and Jack, you as well. It's that chess match that I love, of finding the right position, the right piece to move to the right place at the right time. And then the other half of that as a coach is to really make sure the player understands the whys and the how of them being in that position and everyone surrounding them in that position, right? I think back now, perhaps we didn't do a good enough job explaining to that player how he fit into the overall five people on the ice in that situation and why he was succeeding, right? So, Mike, you first at the youth level, this is probably, we're talking, 12 up now, but it's so important to explain, the full picture with the game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that age, and to Jack's point, working with the older kids, they were the older men, women, right? That they're really kind of in their positions of where they probably are. I mean, they're, it's 14, 15, 16. It's going to be, it was becomes more difficult to change a forward to a defenseman, and the everybody plays every position kind of mentality and philosophy has to sway a little bit because kids are just good at certain positions and they understand the tactics of the game. So I think we're Jack seeing, and Jack, I would imagine you even use like his ice time sparingly, right? Like putting him in and say, okay, well, here's an offensive zone situation. Here's a good time to put the player out there rather than maybe a neutral zone or an end zone face off where, okay, well, he's not even going to get down the ice. So what's the point of putting him out there? He's not an advantage to us. So I think that's great that you can look at that tactically. And I would really love to hear, how you presented that to that player, like how without him feeling, oh God, I'm just pigeonholed into this one position. I love the fact that if you're able to articulate to the player that, wow, you're going to be really valuable to us, and this is how we're going to use you, and this is why we're going to use you this way.
So this was back when I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. I was the assistant. I didn't really have a lot of ideas in terms of, player deployment or tactics or whatever. And, to his credit, it was more the player that kind of proved to us that he was going to be able to do it. Like I remember this one time we were losing in a game by a goal or two, and we played him a ton in the third, and he came off the ice. Like I'd never seen a redder face in my life, but just throughout the years, like he just did such a good job. And at the start we weren't sure if he was going to be able to keep up, but he just kept getting a little bit better. He worked really hard, but then he really did a good job of showing us how to use him, right? And I think the only thing that we did was we acknowledged that. But to Mike, to another thing, kind of jumping off your point is at kind of that 12 to 17 age level, like everybody's developing at a different speed, and I think now I work with a lot of minor hockey players in that age group, and for me, it's all about not treating everybody the same. And what I mean is, obviously, we want to treat everybody the same, but we shouldn't at that age, because if you do, then the best kids are not being challenged, and then the worst kids are being left behind. So, one of my big mentors in hockey is Darryl Belfry, and he talks about the idea of stacking the deck. So either stacking the deck in your favor or stacking the deck against you, right?
Yeah.
So one way to do that, if you have a player who's really good or really big, have that player play a lot of 1-on-2s. On the other side, if you have a couple of players who are smaller or maybe less good, have them play 2-on-1s, right? So that everybody gets to touch the puck, and the bigger kids and the better kids are challenged, but then the smaller kids, they're able to make stops and they're able to touch the puck and they're able to have confidence. Like my favorite drill of all time for basically any age group is something that I call a 2 versus 2+1. So it's a 2 versus 2 down low. It's a small area game, really simple, right? You have one goalie, and then both teams kind of whoever has possession, they'll try to score. But then you have one designated offensive player who only plays offense, right? So what you do is, if you have a player who's a little bit weaker, a little bit less confident, maybe a rookie, a player playing up, you put that player in that designated player position, and he or she is touching the puck all the time. They're going to score a couple of goals, and within 10 minutes, you see this player's confidence just blew. Like they're a changed person. And funny enough, I showed this drill to a friend of mine who coaches at the QMJHL level, so really high level players. And he tried it out, and he said, my players were talking about it all day. They thought it was awesome because it allowed them to kind of turn into somebody else for a moment there.
Yeah. So can I jump in there, Lee? Because I think, so we'll just play this clip over and over and over again later on. Because I think what to your point about, following Darryl and working with him and your understanding of that concept, right? And I think, this is kind of not even a pet peeve, but like a teaching point where I hear coaches, especially at the youth level, say, "Oh, I always do 3-on-3 cross ice at the end of the game." I go, "Yeah," or end the practice. I said, but your best players are still your best players, and your weak players are your weak players. So you have to manipulate that environment, and that sometimes it's hard for a youth coach to do that because they don't even understand the piece of, well, isn't the best player going to get the worst player the puck? No, they're not. They're gonna dominate, and they're gonna try to go. So, and I love that. We play that game actually a lot, and we also designate it where we don't tell the goalies who the shooter is, and we try to have them. They get a point if they guess who the goal scorer is supposed to be, because I think it's just for the kids to start looking and having deception and having all those pieces in practice really goes so much more advanced than just saying, oh, we do 3-on-3 cross ice for fun at the end of the game. Yeah, but you're not teaching anything. So I think that point of the tactic part in any time in a small area game, right? I love that fact that you're able to say, well, we want to make our best players better and we want to make our worst players better. The only way we're going to do that is to be able to manipulate the environment so those kids can have the chance to get better. And I think the earlier we can institute that, the better. But to your point, I mean, this is happening with 18 and 19-year-old hockey pros, right? I mean, basically it's the same thing.
Yeah. So the one I would say very unusual, maybe a little bit controversial thing about me as a coach is I don't have a drill book. Okay. So what I'll do is contrary to most coaches where they'll take drills and they'll maybe tweak them or kind of invent their own. What I'll do is I'll watch actual game sequences and then I'll think, okay, how do I reverse engineer the situation, or how do I reverse engineer the situation with a twist, right? So and so I don't need to have drills memorized. I don't need to draw out a diagram before my players do a certain drill, because it's, as I said, it's like 2-on-2 plus 1, go, right? Or it's a 2-on-1, go, or it's a 1-on-1 retrieval plus a pass, go, right? Like, and the reason I do this, first of all, I think it forces me to be better in terms of learning from actual game scenarios and then try to reverse engineer that. But also, a lot of players, even myself included, don't do well when you have a lot of drawings on the board. Okay. And whether it's because I tend to get distracted, that's on me. But some players simply, they have learning disabilities, or they have some things that's out of their control. Like I remember hearing the story about a former first-round NHL draft pick, very, very skilled player, very high-scoring player in his country, drafted in the first round, comes over to North America, couldn't stick. Right, and eventually goes back to Europe, has a very productive long career there. He might still be playing. He's got to be like in his mid to late 30s. And the reason why he never stuck in North America, despite his, elite hand skills or his elite skating, is because he had a learning disability. So as soon as a coach showed him something on the board, he could not absorb it. He could understand maybe like simple like audio cues, or he could understand video, but if you draw something on the board, he would be unable to absorb it, right? So for me, a way to be more inclusive of that is basically, if you tell a player you're going to play 2-on-1, everybody understands that.
Right.
Whereas if you draw out like a very complex pattern on the board, not everybody's going to be able to learn that quickly enough to actually do the reps correctly, even though they could do the reps correctly.
One of the great points you're bringing up, and I want to echo this for the especially the coaches that listen to our show, is what we found, and science backs this up, is that people basically learn one of three ways, right? It's visually, audibly, or they have to actually do it, right? So, or see it, right? So one of the points you're making is, when I was coaching, I love that you're making me think of this story. I was coaching in Europe, like I said, and the head coach is a tactical genius. He is a tactical genius. And we're going in the locker room before games, before practices, and he is for 40 minutes drawing stuff on the board. And then for 40 minutes after the game, frustrated that nobody understood what he was drawing on the board. And I remember I had to have a talk with him, and he was a great coach. He would always listen. He would always, this is the best part about him, is he was always willing to listen to everybody's opinion. And I said that, we're coaching a lot of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that do not have the attention span of 5 minutes, much less 40 minutes. So we need to rethink how we're explaining this stuff. And we really did. We kind of overhauled the entire thing. And then within weeks, we were seeing massive, massive improvement. But for the coaches out there, really think about how you're conveying the information to your players, especially, as you said, Jack, if they have a learning disability. They might not be the type of player that can see it on the board. You might have to show them. They might have to see it on video, right? I mean, you'll always get the players that can just see the board and do it. All right, but as coaches, we need to do a better job of explaining things multiple ways, as much as that might infuriate some people. The other thing too, Jack, I want to say is that, in my opinion, and I want to pay you this compliment. You're talking about Daryl Belfry, as another person I respect. You know, when I look at people like Anatoly Tarasov, we talked about him, Lou Vero, Daryl Belfry, and now you know, you all have thought outside the box to change the game. I really think you are changing the game in the way that you do things, right? Not just because of your blog, but like I said, I can count on one hand the amount of coaches I've had, including you. I mean this, that everything they put out, I learned something every time, right? Most of the time, it's the same thing over and over again. But I want to bring that into our next question, actually, because a majority of our audience, as I said, is parents and kids and coaches that are under 18. And I want to get your thoughts on youth development, you know, from Adams up. When do you think is a good time to start diving deeper into analytics and tactics? As Mike alluded to, you know, when you're in those like lower levels where really the game is just about having fun and falling in love with it, there are some things you can do to outside basic skills, which are very important, skating, you know, to teach leadership, to teach tactical awareness, you know. So how do you look at the game? I know you're coaching at a pro level and elite level, but you said you deconstruct, right? Look at the youth hockey levels and deconstruct that for us about how you'd approach it.
So I would most I would say I would mostly speak from personal experience in that when I was between 7 and 9, I played the lowest level of house league. I was the worst player on that lowest level house league team, and then after that, I kind of got discouraged and I stopped playing for a few years. And it was around 2002 where I actually got back into the game because for my birthday, I got a copy of EA Sports NHL 2002 and I started playing it. And then at some point, I was looking at the player animation and I was like, why is this player shooting off of his inside foot? And I never thought about shooting that way before. I was just like, before I was just trying to lift the puck, but now I'm like, why are they shooting off both feet? Like, what's the difference? So then the very next day, I go down to a roller hockey rink near my house. It was an outdoor roller hockey rink built on top of a tennis court. It wasn't very well maintained, but it was there. You know, you can go whenever. And I just started shooting pucks. And that's kind of how I got back into falling in love with hockey, because I realized that I could actually experiment with stuff. Like I love playing with Legos. So that was like kind of like a very movement-based way for me to play around with stuff. And that's kind of how I got back into hockey. And I guess most kids, they don't have that opportunity of being their own coach. And really being my own coach was how I got back into hockey. So, you know, I started playing street hockey with my friends. I started playing roller hockey just by myself. And then within about a year and a half, I started playing organized hockey again. And now I was playing a better level of house league and I was an average player. So instead of being like the worst player on the C team, I was an average player on the A team, which was crazy because I skipped 3 years of hockey. I didn't skate at all. Right. So then afterwards, I was like, okay, well, this is really cool because, you know, I was hitting puberty. My body was changing. I was growing. I was losing baby fat. My shot was getting better. My skating was getting okay. Then I make high school varsity. Then I go to university. Then I come back and coach high school varsity. So that was, for me, the ability or the opportunity to coach myself and be my own skills instructor was really one of the most life-changing experiences I had. And I kind of wish that for every single kid playing hockey, you know, in that age range, but very few of them do because they're being pulled in different directions and they're constantly being told what to do. So whenever I see a kid with kind of an initiative to kind of figure things out for himself or herself, I would say that's probably the most important thing. You got to nurture them. And you got to, you know, if the kid's looking for more ice time or certain resources, you know, give that to him. Don't give it all to him because then he'll get complacent, but give him a little bit, give him the taste, and then let him take it from there. Like I remember in the summers, my parents were like, "You're not playing summer hockey. We're not we're not spending money on that." And then eventually, you know, because of how I was getting better and I was working hard, they're like, "Okay, well, you're playing 3-on-3 once a week." So then I was like, "Okay, but I like to get on the ice 3 or 4 times a week." So what I did was I would take the bus for an hour, go to the rink, and then work as a shooter for a goalie camp. So that's how I would get on the ice, and I loved it because I love shooting, and I'd be shooting on kids younger than me. I'd be like sniping them top corner all the time. But that's how I got my ice time. Like I was my own coach. I was my own skills instructor. I didn't do any off ice training because I was lazy. So I didn't do that. And then I was like my own kind of agent, like finding like different places for me to play and work out and stuff like that. So that's probably the most important thing. And then everything else is just having access to the right people or the right information.
You know what I love about that story, and Jack, by the way, I love that you tell a lot of these answers in stories because people remember stories.
Yeah.
You know, one is that I think you and I are very similar in our journey through the game because I was always searching for my own stuff too. But you know, something I want to tell the parents at home is that either side of that coin is okay. You know, like I remember coaching younger kids this year, and I got some parents that says, you know, he's not really competitive yet. He doesn't really want it. Well, I'm like, your kid's 7. It's that's okay. What's important is that your kid loves the game right now. You know, like some of this stuff will come. You know, another great lesson I learned this year, and Jack, this is to your point. Actually, you paid me a compliment by accident because now you're making me think I might have done this right. This is my son's first year playing Adam. He's 7 years old.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I can't really explain this, he has this kind of knack to play defense. He always wants to get back to protect the goalie. He always wants to get back and stop them from scoring. And, you know, it's funny because at first, very first, again, as a new hockey parent, you know, I deal with some of this stuff new hockey parents deal with. My attitude at very first was like, well, you know, you go score, like you want to go play offense. And then I quickly turned that off and goes like, if he wants to play defense, I should cultivate this because there's probably not a lot of 7-year-olds that want to play defense. Yeah. And then, you know, the other coaches on the team affirmed to me that, you know, look, that competitive nature of offense may come in time. Next year, he might want to be a goal scorer. But like you said, I started to speak with him at home. We went over defensive, you know, basic defensive strategy. But again, to your point, that's where he wants to operate. I'm going to cultivate that and teach him how to be a good teammate and everything else. But like I said, you know, that's where he's at. You know, when you and I were growing up, it sounds like we had that kind of knack for knowledge and to find our own way. I want to say this to parents too. If your kid's not there yet, that's also okay. Find out what your kids love and help them with that, right? The mistake I think parents can make sometimes, and it's a common mistake, is they can vicariously try and live through their kid a little bit too much. And most of the time you don't even realize you're doing it, right? You just want something so much. And I think the key to that, and again, this is for the whole panel here, right? I think the key to that is sometimes you have to listen more than speak, right? Which is really hard to do with young kids for multiple reasons. But, you know, if you haven't asked your kid before, I don't really care their age, hey, what do you want to do? Right? I think we missed something. You know, Christy, Mike, again, you guys are further down the parenting journey than I am with this. But I always try and ask my son and my daughter too now, hey, what do you want? What are you interested in? Right? Before I try and tell them what I think they should be doing.
Right. And also you're going to see signs like Jack, in your case, I mean, you hopped on a bus and, you know, did it on your own. You signed up to be a shooter. I mean, that shows self-motivation. I mean, kids, so you'll pick up whether a kid really wants to pursue and you know, go ahead and do the summer sessions if they're really passionate about it. They don't want to do anything else. So you look for the signs of the kids, if they're burning out, if they need a break. And if they're like Jack, who just, he's got that passion, he's going to find, if he's got a will, he's going to find a way to do it, which is awesome.
Yeah. I think I try to, Jack's story is so similar to when you hear, when I talk to coaches now and parents about, where their kids are and what their motivation is. And I'll use that, a similar story when I didn't start hockey till I was 11 years old. And the only way I could play was in the summer is to, volunteer at the rink to clean the boards. And then in between ice cuts, I would shoot and skate. Right. And, same thing. I get on the train with my father. He's going to New York City, and I get on the train with hockey equipment in the middle of summer. And I get off, I walk a mile down the road to the rink. I'd hang out there all day, unsupervised. Nobody knew where I was. I can't even imagine. I wouldn't even do that to my 15-year-old right now. But I think, just sitting there all day and in between figure skaters, I'd go, okay, well, I'm going to go skate and I'll try this. But it's that self-exploration, whether you're 5 years old and you're imagining playing, and maybe that's where EA Sports and some of the video games come into play. To Jack's point, is you get to see things like, I could try that, or I'm inquisitive now to know what that is, and I want to know how a player does that. Unless it's, how to do 15 right hand jabs. I don't know. But other than that, it's a great opportunity for kids to learn and explore and listening to your child. And it's hard though, because we all want to guide the kids like, no, this is what you want. And I know you want this. No, you always say I want it, but that's not what I want. And you hear it over and over and over again. And I think that's such a important point to all of us to really remember, and you watch the journey of where players come from, how they got there, and where that end point is. There's many, many, many ways to get there. And I think it's, it's refreshing to hear, somebody at Jack's level of, where he's working with these high performance athletes. I do the same thing. Every, private group that I work with, or the pro kids or the semi-pro kids and the college kids I work with, I always ask them too, like, what do you want out of this? I know dad is the one that got the lessons. He's the one that's paying. He's the one that's working on the schedule, but what do you want? Not with him in the room. What do you want? Because then I need to know what kind of push I can give. Like, am I just here collecting a paycheck, or can I motivate you in a different way that I can drive you and find out what you need, not what dad thinks you need? Because that's not going to help me get through to the athlete. And I think that's a great point to you listen to any of your kids on your teams if you have the time and you can carve that out as a coach.
So what I would also add is, based on my story, you would think that I was a very motivated, very hardworking person, but I'm incredibly lazy in other ways. Like, as I said, I can't remember of any summer where I spent more than 5 minutes training my sprints or lifting weights. Like I was incredibly lazy in that way. Like, before I discovered hockey for the second time, I would stay at home and eat pizza pockets and play video games all day. Like, my parents hated me for that, right? Like, I was just a typical fat kid. But it's all about kind of like going beyond, like, okay, is this kid lazy or is he not lazy? It's more like, how is he lazy? When is he lazy? And when is he self-motivated? Like, everybody has that little area in his personality where, like, for him, some or her, something that you would consider work, he would consider play, and he can do it for hours.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to find something and then have the resources where I can just indulge in that. And because of that, I'm seen as a hardworking person, but really I'm not. Like, it wasn't, taking a bus for an hour wasn't a big deal for me. Right. It's a bigger deal to take the bus an hour to go to school than to go to hockey practice. For me, like, that was just, there was no comparison, right? So it's more about finding, kind of, as you said, like, things that the kid wants to do and things that speak to him or her.
Right. Well, and Jack, here's the deal. I'll tell you this. You took the bus because you loved what you were doing at that time, right? Like, and that's why it was easy, right? We all heard that quote, love what you do and you won't work a day in your life. Right. And I know exactly what you're talking about. What's funny about your story, if I'm not mistaken, NHL 2002, that was one with Mario Lemieux on the cover. Is that correct?
Yep.
See, you and I have a similar wavelength with this.
Yeah.
Also, real quick side note, and Jack, I wanted to see if you can confirm this. I used to go to the goalie clinics as well. And the reason I went there, I found out, was that actually made me a better shooter, not just because I was taking shots, but I was learning how goalies would think.
Yep.
Right. And that was better than any like power shooting clinic I ever did, where you're just taking 1,000 shots. You start to learn how a goalie thinks.
Yep.
You're going to become better. But you make great points about cultivating the aspects of you that work and how you turn that into something. This next question, I was actually going to ask you this last, but it kind of flows perfectly into what we're talking about. One of the parts of your story that I loved was that during your time with the Canadiens, you started to really see deeper into the game than most. As again, you were a writer at the time. And I read an article that your boss challenged you in a way, saying that, what qualifies you to have this opinion? And I really think it's important for our followers to hear this story and how it drove you, because there's ways to be involved in the game outside playing, but it takes the same level of work and commitment of a player to get there. And, my parallel story to this, if I may, was, I've worked in the game at several points. There was a time I was not in the game, and I was watching one of those outdoor game kind of documentaries. It was the Flyers versus, I believe, Rangers Road to the Winter Classic. I'm sorry, Capitals. It was Capitals. And George McPhee, who was at the time the GM of the Capitals, they asked him a question about fans, right? And he goes, I'll never forget this because it really changed my trajectory. he said that, yeah, fans are great. I love fans, and we need our fans. He goes, but the truth is this. He goes, if they knew anything about the game, they'd be in the game. All right. And I remember I thought that was kind of harsh for him to say, but I also remember thinking, I need to get back in the game. Like, I need to be in the game. Right. So that moment, at least it seems like from what I was reading, when you were challenged of what qualifies you, seemed to kind of be lit a fire, for lack of a better reason, and you pursued it to the point that you're coaching in the AHL and you're with NHL organizations. So could you just dive into that story for a minute, and then, like I said, explain what that spark was like, and how you drove yourself to go beyond just the status quo?
Um, I've always had like a very kind of combative personality. Like my teachers, a lot of my teachers didn't really like me because I talk back and stuff. But like not in like a troublemaking way, but more like just because you're a teacher doesn't mean that I'm gonna take what you say as gospel. That kind of thing. Right?
Right. I can see how they would be annoyed by that.
Yeah. And um, and at that point, and I mean, my grandfather was a teacher, so like teachers didn't really impress or intimidate me necessarily. And like I'd always done well at school, but I just like it wasn't. I just felt like school was a thing where you would do better if you went along, and I didn't always go along. And same thing in the real world, I guess, also. But
Could say that.
so what happened with the Canadians was I started using kind of references to advanced analytics like Corsi and stuff like that in my articles, and I was trying to get more in depth in terms of like, okay, well, this is like what the line combinations were, and this is like what they did and stuff like that. And then basically my editor was like, like our casual, like the people reading us are casual fans, like they don't really care about this, and also what makes you qualified to talk about this in this way. And on the one hand, in my head, we sat down for this meeting, and he laid it on me, and on the one hand, I was like, screw you, okay. And on the other hand, is like, well, you know what, he's totally right, because I don't have a resume that included coaching experience at a high level, or working in hockey ops at any level after high school. And then luckily enough, my contract didn't get renewed after that season, so I went to McGill. I did all the stuff I wanted to do, and the rest is history, kind of thing. So and that guy I know is still in that same job. He hasn't progressed whatsoever in 8 years. So there you have it. So really, a lot of my motivations is internal, but a lot of it is external as well. It's just the idea that I just think I can be better than someone if I set my mind to it, within reason, of course. I'm not going to be better at hockey than Cale Makar or Sidney Crosby, right? But if it's coaching, or if it's analysis, if it's writing, then I think I can do it. So that was essentially it. Yeah.
I love that answer, man. Like, here's the thing, Jack, is I don't think young people hear that type of story enough. I think we're all told, as you said, sit in your place, follow your role, do what you're told. And again, don't get me wrong, for everybody listening, there are absolutely times where your children or you probably do need to do that, right? There are times that call for that. But if you know something can be better, if you know you can do better, and someone challenges you like you were challenged, Jack, stand up and move forward. I love that story. And I think it's insanely important for people to hear, right? That you don't sit still. Go ahead. Sorry.
So what I'll add to that is, for the most part, I'm a pretty law-abiding citizen. I
Yeah,
follow
right.
directions for the most part, but I would say that this is actually a great parallel to players.
Right.
Because if you watch a great player, whether it's Sidney Crosby, Austin Matthews, and especially a guy like Johnny Gaudreau, who's maybe not very big, not very fast, the way that they are productive at the NHL level is they'll play inside their team structure until they don't. So maybe 9 times out of 10, they're going to be in a good spot for the teammates, and they're going to play the structure, and they're going to get back defensively, and they're going to be in the correct place, and the coaches are going to like and trust them for that. But that 10th time, they're going to lean for offense. They're going to sniff for offense, I would say, or they would do something a little bit unusual, right? They they feel something in the pits of their stomach, or they'll make a read, and then that's when they get that breakaway or that 2-on-1 or make that surprising play that allows them to score. So, and for me, it's the same thing. Whether you're a student, whether you're someone who's working in a corporate environment, whether you're a hockey player, whether you're a coach, you want to be in structure, but also you want to take your spots and not be in structure. Because first of all, being in structure most of the time is going to get you the opportunities. It's going to allow you to stay in that position. But then going outside of structure at strategic moments, that's really what's going to allow you to get ahead of people and break through.
Right. Which echoes again your story with the Canadiens and that person still being in the same job.
So he's in structure 100% of the time.
Exactly. You know, again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say this too, that this is something that you do so well on your blog, is that you'll find players that are breaking out of their structure or doing structure really well and really break it down to show you things. I please forgive me if I'm wrong here. Did you do one on Adam on Fox on the Rangers on his defensive ability?
Yep.
Right. I found that fascinating because you dove into the tiny things that he's doing so well that is making him a Norris candidate, potentially a winner, right? This year. And that's the type of stuff that I love. So I'm going to change gears a little bit here, Jack. And we did talk about this a little bit earlier. You were not born in this country. You said you were born in China, and there have been calls for hockey to be more inclusive over the past few years. And I wanted to get your opinion on how do you think the game is progressing with that? And what do you think can be done to continue to make headway in that realm?
Well, I mean, it's progressing by that almost by default, because basically North America is a far more diverse place than even when I got here. And so, I'm seeing more, Chinese players playing hockey, more Latinos, more Black players, more Arab players. Like it's just happening because the overall look of the population is changing, right? So that's the first thing. Like the second thing is, as these things change, now you have these kind of smaller role models popping up here and there, right? Like Quinton Byfield playing his first NHL game. Some kid's going to see that, and then that's going to push him or her to play the game or to want to be like Quinton Byfield, right? When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of role models. We didn't have a lot of Asian people in hockey. Like Richard Park, who's Korean, was probably the closest thing that I had as a role model as an NHL player. I didn't even know that Paul Kariya was half Japanese, because for me, like he was just white. I learned that later. But then there were other kind of really subtle role models when the French version of Hockey Night in Canada hired Danielle Sauvageau, who was a female head coach. She coached Team Canada at the 2002 Olympics and won the gold medal with the women's team. I was like, okay, well, at least they're hiring women in broadcasting now. She never played the game. She was a good coach, obviously, but so that kind of became a bit of a role model for me too, and that's why I'm really into women's hockey, because just the fact that it wasn't the same people and it was a little bit different, that kind of gave me hope. So I was basically looking for role models wherever I can find them, like, whereas today I think kids can be way pickier in ways that I wasn't, but it's always, I think, is always becoming more inclusive, and for me, it wasn't really about that at all growing up. I was never like, oh, I'll be the first Chinese person to do this or that. It was just like, I want to do this, I like this, I'm going to do it well, and I'm going to do it better than you. So for me, that was good enough.
I love that answer as well, for multiple reasons. Christy, I want to turn it to you real quick. Any chance we can call out what your daughter's doing and with her committee? I want you to at least tell Jack about that a little bit too, because I think
I'm sure
phenomenal.
Jack is aware of it. The college kids are all getting together. They formed a big committee nationwide to come up with strategies on how to make hockey more inclusive and to get the message to every rink in America that hockey is for everyone. And they've pulled from all levels of hockey to just brainstorm on what we need to do better to make sure that no kid feels like they can't play, to empower them, women, men of all races, of all color, all ethnicities. Come and join this amazing game, and you can help change it and make it better. So I'm really proud of her. They're coming up with some good strategies, And hopefully by the end of the semester, this semester, they can come up with some sort of a game plan, so to speak, to do better, to make hockey more inclusive. So yeah, so we're taking steps. We're getting there, but we got a long way to go.
So to your point about bringing more people into hockey, I think that's certainly an important part of it. But the other part is actually helping people stay in hockey. So for me, one of the biggest opportunities in the game right now is women's players who played at a high level but aren't good enough to play at the international level. So when I was at McGill, I must have coached 60 or 70 girls over the years. One of them is on the Canadian national team, Melody Daou. So she's a great player. But I would say probably 3/4 of them don't play hockey at all anymore, which is a shame because they were all good players. They all got good coaching. They can and they could all be good coaches or role models, except there's not really a venue for them to continue. So now you have the NWHL, you have the PWH.
No, I have problems with it too. Don't worry.
Yeah,
the other one. Yeah.
The other
Dream
one.
Gap Tour. That's what I say.
The Dream Gap Tour. You have that, but then what about your average D3 player or your average D1 player who don't get the opportunities to continue, whether it's because they found a real job, so they have a career now and they don't have time for hockey, or they're not good enough to make one of those professional teams or a national team, or maybe they don't have the financial ability to continue playing the game because you're getting paid a little bit or not at all. So for me, the thing to grow the game is to create a generation of not necessarily women professional players, but women hockey professionals. So whether you're a coach, whether you're in skills development, one of my former players is, I think, one of the best skills coaches in Quebec right now. She's my age. She's 32 or so. She's a hockey professional. Like, she played in the pro leagues in Montreal before, but now she's making a career out of passing her skills on. And who is she passing these skills on to? What's probably kids, maybe kids from disadvantaged areas, maybe kids who are new to hockey. So the way to bring more people in is to help more people stay in the game.
Right.
And giving them some real career options, not just as players but as coaches and so on and so forth, right? And so I think
Right.
those
And you're right, it's limited. I mean, you can't really play at the upper level. I mean, there are more opportunities for women as college coaches now, and we have women who are reffing our college games too, which is fantastic to see. But you're right, as far as playing professional hockey, extremely limited. That's got to change.
Just as we start to close things out here, I'll just say this, and Jack, your story proves this too, that it doesn't matter what gender you are, where you come from, wherever you're from on the globe. If you're around the game and you fall in love with the game, you fall in love with the game. It's not owned by anyone. And that, anyone that falls in love with the game can do amazing things. I have always been amazed to hear the stories, Jack, yours included, of people that get into this game and they make it their life's work. And I think that whether that's playing or anything in between, and I think you're right that, we don't look enough at the opportunities for, women or people of color or multinational people in the game itself. And, are we creating those opportunities for everybody? But I'll tell you, man, you are a trailblazer. And I think, you really inspire me. I'm not just saying that because you're on the show. I've been following you since a mutual friend of Mike and I, Bryce Salvador, kind of shared your information with me. And I said, wow, this is amazing. I mean, I am inspired. Before I close it out, Mike, I want to turn it to you. I didn't get to you much this episode, and I apologize. Is anything else you want to ask or say before we move on?
No, I mean, I'd echo you, and just following Jack and really exploring all the different avenues of how he looks at hockey, and whether you agree with him or not as a coach. You have to take in all those considerations of understanding, how does this person look at a breakdown? How does this person look at skill development? How does this person look at, the way a player is positioning themselves for success? And then, I say this all the time with my, anybody that wants to debunk cross ice or small area games or all this, mites playing half ice, show me the other way and I'll go with you. You prove to me that it works,
Right.
and I'll go with you. I'm all for the best way. But when you watch and you read Jack's information, you're seeing the best way. So dive into it, debunk it, try to, right? And I'm sure Jack would love that challenge. And go ahead, just got to get it. And I think, the biggest message I think in this episode too is, don't think because you played hockey and all your life you played hockey and you're always a high level AAA player and played pro and that automatically you're going to get a whistle around your neck and be the smartest person in the room. And I think you have to look and understand that everybody looks at the game from a different perspective. And I think what Jack's done is educate himself, and probably from more of a blank slate, Jack. I mean, that, you didn't have a lot of those influences that maybe a lot of these other players did. And you found a way to take all the influences of the people that you were able to read. And you're certainly being around guys like Daryl and the pro guys you're around, getting an opportunity to, you build your own path, which is great. And congratulations.
So I guess to sum up, I will share my secret with you in terms of how I got here. So there's two of them. Okay. And I'm not joking. These are actually my secrets. But the first one is, sure, I didn't have a traditional upbringing in the game. I didn't play at a pro level. My parents didn't play. I was born in another country, obviously. But first of all, I've been successful because I have fewer bad habits to unlearn in terms of how to think about the game. And the second thing is, and this goes back to why my newsletter is free if you just want to read the articles. There is a paying option if you want to sign up for weekly courses with me. But basically, the articles are free because by writing an article and sharing my ideas with you and sharing my perspective with you, I will always be a step ahead of you, but also I'm learning at the same time. So the more I write, the more I share for free, actually, the better I get. So it's like, what I know, but what I know about 5 minutes ago. So I'm 5 minutes ahead of you, right?
Jack, I can't wait to tease that to our audience that you have to listen to this entire episode to get the Jack Hand secrets before we're going to find out. But look, man, I really want to tell you that I appreciate you coming on here today. For our listeners, I've never done this before. I am giving this man's blog my absolute highest recommendation. I rarely do that. I am happy that you were 5 minutes ahead of me with your blog, man, because it is, as I said in the beginning, it's transcendent. It is informative. It is well written. It is well put together. It really is going to change the game. And Jack, just so I don't butcher this, could you please tell people the easiest way to find that blog?
So the easiest way to find my blog is actually on Twitter. So if you go on Twitter, my Twitter screen name is JHANHKY. And then once you have that, well, it's my newsletter is jhanhky.substack.com. So,
Perfect.
so sign up for my Twitter if you have it. If you don't, just go to the newsletter or just type in my name on Google because it's been searched so much that it'll just pop up. So Jack,
And Jack, you
my
really,
name plus hockey and
yeah. Please keep opening up eyes. And I got to just say, you are light years ahead of me. Talk about 5 minutes, light years ahead of me. Okay. Thank you. I really learned a lot today. You're amazing.
Thank you for having me on. And it's actually really nice for me to be able to verbalize my thoughts and because I was able to verbalize, now I understand my own thought process better. So it's helped me as well. So thank you for that.
No, that's wonderful. And Jack, we'll make sure that for all the listeners or the watchers, obviously your blog will be somewhere linked to this video. But yeah, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. Thank you so much for joining us today. That's obviously going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Thank you, Jack Hand, for being here. You can check out all of our episodes, all of our interviews, everything at ourkidsplayhockey.com, or look on Facebook, follow the page. You can listen, watch, do whatever you want with this show. It's wherever podcasts can be heard. For Krista Casciano Burns and Mike Benelli, I'm Lee Elias, and we'll see you on the next episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Have a great day, everyone.